The keys jangled in the lock, a sound that used to mean home, but now felt like an intrusion. Ellen stood in the kitchen of her Chicago apartment, stirring a pot of soup, her hands trembling. The door swung open, and there he was, Mark, her husband of 12 years, strutting in like he still owned the place. He didn't. Not anymore. 6 months ago, he'd sold his half of their shared apartment to a stranger, pocketed the cash, and vanished with his mistress, leaving Ellen to pick up the pieces of a life she barely recognized. Now, here he was, smirking, his designer coat dripping with the arrogance of a man who thought he'd won, still slaving over that stove. Huh? Mark's voice was a blade, sharp and mocking. I just came to see how you're holding up in this dump without me. He glanced around, expecting to see defeat, cracked walls, unpaid bills, a woman broken by his betrayal. Instead, the apartment glowed with warmth. Fresh paint, new curtains, the scent of rosemary from the soup. Ellen's eyes, though tired, held a quiet strength that unsettled him. She didn't respond, just kept stirring. The silence unnerved Mark, who was used to her tears, her pleas. He'd come to gloat, to rub his new life in her face, but something was off. The apartment wasn't falling apart. Neither was she. 6 months earlier, Ellen's world had collapsed. Mark's affair wasn't a surprise. He'd grown distant, his late nights at work reeking of perfume, but the betrayal of selling his half of their home was a gut punch. The new co-owner, a faceless investor, could have forced her out, but instead, they'd sent a letter offering to let her stay as long as she needed. No demands, no rush. Just kindness from a stranger. That letter, tucked in her nightstand, became her lifeline. Ellen could have crumbled. She was 38, childless, her savings drained from years of supporting Mark's business ventures. But instead of breaking, she began to rebuild. She took a second job at a community center, teaching art to kids from the South Side. She painted the apartment walls herself, each stroke a reclamation of her space, her life. She started cooking again, not just for herself, but for neighbors, single moms, elderly widowers, anyone who needed a warm meal. The apartment, once a battleground of arguments, became a haven. People knocked on her door not out of pity, but because they felt safe there. She didn't know it then, but her quiet acts of kindness were rippling beyond her walls. The kids she taught began drawing pictures of hope, bright suns, families holding hands. Their parents, inspired by Ellen's generosity, started checking in on each other, sharing groceries, babysitting. A small community was forming, stitched together by a woman who'd been left with nothing but her heart. Mark's smirk faltered as he noticed a photo on the wall, a group of kids holding up colorful paintings, Ellen in the center, smiling. "What's this?" he scoffed, trying to regain control. "You playing Mother Teresa now?" Ellen set down her spoon and faced him, her voice steady. "I'm living, Mark. Something you never understood." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Living? In this crumbling place?" "I sold my half for a fortune, Ellen. I'm in a penthouse now. You're stuck here, scraping by." Before she could respond, the door opened again. A young girl, maybe 10, burst in, clutching a drawing. "Miss Ellen." "I finished it." Behind her trailed a woman, her face weary but kind, carrying a loaf of homemade bread. "Ellen, you left your scarf at the center," the woman said, then froze, sensing the tension. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Who are these people?" The girl, oblivious to his tone, held up her drawing, a vibrant sketch of the apartment building, its windows glowing like stars. "This is for you, Miss Ellen. For making our home better." Ellen knelt, her eyes glistening. "It's beautiful, Sasha." "Thank you." The woman, Maria, stepped forward, placing the bread on the counter. "Ellen's been a blessing to us," she said, her gaze flicking to Mark. "She feeds half the block, teaches our kids, keeps this place alive." "Who are you?" Mark's face reddened. "I'm her husband." Maria's brow arched. "Funny. Never seen you here." The room seemed to shrink around Mark, his bravado unraveling. He hadn't expected this, Ellen, surrounded by people who cared for her, who saw her not as the discarded wife, but as a cornerstone. He'd come to mock her, to prove he'd escaped a sinking ship, but the ship wasn't sinking. It was thriving. The truth hit Mark like a freight train, but the real shock was yet to come. As Maria and Sasha left, Ellen pulled an envelope from a drawer and handed it to him. "This came for you," she said quietly. Inside was a legal document, a deed transfer. The anonymous investor who'd bought Mark's half of the apartment was giving it back to Ellen, free and clear. No strings attached. A note was clipped to the papers. "You've shown what a home can be. It's yours." Mark's hands shook as he read it. Who is this investor?" Ellen shrugged. "Doesn't matter. They saw something you never did." The realization crashed over him. He'd sold his stake in a home that was now priceless, not in dollars, but in love, in community. He'd traded it for a fleeting affair and a cold penthouse. Ellen, with nothing, had built everything. He stammered, searching for words, but Ellen cut him off. "You can go now, Mark. This isn't your home anymore." As the door closed behind him, Ellen stood alone, the soup still simmering. She thought of the kids' drawings, Maria's bread, the stranger's gift. Tears fell, not from pain but from gratitude. She'd been abandoned, yet she wasn't alone. She'd been broken, yet she was whole. Outside, the Chicago wind howled, but inside, the apartment was warm, alive with the echoes of laughter and shared meals. Ellen smiled, stirring the soup. She'd lost half an apartment, but gained a family not bound by blood, but by kindness. And that, she knew, was a fortune no one could sell.